Welcome to another Horse & Co tutorial. Today we're going to look at a horse called Rusty. Rusty is actually from just across the road. He was going to be relocated to some new grazing, but he's decided that he's not really keen on getting on the float. So this is the first time we've seen Rusty. We're going to go through a little bit of groundwork, not too much. We're just going to brush touch it basically. If you want a more detailed tutorial on the groundwork, I suggest you watch a few on Storm doing his groundwork and get a better idea on what we're trying to achieve. Now we're going to keep it nice and simple and quiet today because we've had a lot of rain over the last couple of days and the paddocks are actually too wet to use, and so we're going to have to use the parking area here. There's quite a few stones around, and Rusty is barefoot and we don't want to cause any damage to his hooves if we can. So we're just going to make a start here on some going backwards. Just using the friendly tool at the moment. I'm going to be using a dressage whip here, and whatever we use for a driving tool we need to be able to use as a friendly tool. So they can't be scared of what I'm using. It can be anything really. I just choose to use a dressage whip because it's convenient. So we're going to start looking at some coming forwards and going backwards first. With Rusty, he is a little bit nervous and doesn't like a lot of pressure on the head. Now with the groundwork, I'm not going to work on getting it dead perfect. We are trying to stick to a time limit here, and so I just really want to see. I don't really want an A on everything. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of pressure and ask him to go back in a straight line, just so he's got a little bit of an understanding of what I want. So when it comes to working on the float and I ask him to go backwards, he knows what I want and I'm not having to teach him to go backwards plus going on the float at the same time. So when I apply a little bit of pressure and he goes backwards in just a couple of steps, that's all we need. Just release the pressure and give him a pat, or a rub, sorry. Okay, we have an understanding now of going backwards. So what we're going to do now is look at pushing quadrant 4. We've been working quadrant 1 at the moment. If you don't understand what quadrants are, if you just watch the tutorial on general information, it'll explain the quadrants and what I'm talking about there. So we'll now move on and have a look at the next exercise. As I said, we don't want it to be dead perfect, just an understanding. And going back a couple of steps like that is an understanding for what we need for today. Alright, just pushing on quadrant 4 there, coming backwards to let the head clearance, and keeping a triangle towards quadrant 4. I don't want to go in a circle, I want to keep a straight line to quadrant 4, then just ask him to move around and straighten up with me. Alright, just doing the other side here, but watch how I just come back from the shoulders and then just push quadrant 4, keep my pressure on quadrant 4. I don't go around in a circle, I stay on a straight line towards quadrant 4, give enough head clearance so he can turn his head around and doesn't have to go back at the same time. If I was too close to him, then I'd have to ask him to back at the same time as disengaging his quadrant 4. When you disengage the back end, just push quadrant 4 around and he backs back like that. You don't want him to finish on a backward motion, so just ask him to come forward a little bit and then praise him. Okay, just moving on here and looking at another exercise. We're going to be pushing the front quadrant across, actually the delicate zone, in front of the shoulder, and I'm just going to go just a couple of steps, or one step with those front legs across like that, preferably without the back legs moving, and then just release the pressure. I just want to do one step, don't need to do too many because we're just using it for float loading, so we don't need to go in a big full 360 circle. Just one step will be plenty. Okay, if he moves backwards when I'm asking him to front pass, I just go with him and follow, keeping in the right position and not letting the head go past my hand, just keeping the pressure on, and then when I've got the movement I want, then release. Alright, time to look at some basic lunging, just at a walk in both directions. I just want to guide, teach him to guide from quadrant 1 and push quadrant 5 and sometimes a little bit of 3, pushing quadrant 3. Just asking him to follow a field, that's all I need. I don't need to change direction or do any trotting, just need to get him to follow a field in both directions. Now, ready for the float now. Now I have skipped, I did miss out side passing in the groundwork because I won't be needing it today. So we're just going to leave that out to save a bit of time. And we're going to move on to now onto the first step of the float loading. And that's pushing Rusty between a gap without pushing or barging into me basically. So go between me and the float without hitting me. We start out at a fair distance away from the float, well not too far, maybe 3 or 4 meters. We go from one side of the float to the other side of the float, and when he's on each side of the float, that's his comfort zone. So he goes from his comfort zone between the tight gap to the other comfort zone. Okay, so I'm going to do this for a few times now, and we're going to, each time he gets better at it, or he's quite good at it, I'm going to make the gap a little bit tighter between myself and the float. And from each side of the float to the other side of the float is his comfort zone, so he needs to be able to relax on each side of the float. Now remember the main idea of this is his comfort zones at each side of the float, but also he walks between me and the float slowly and doesn't trot or barge or touch me. If he was to barge into me, I'd give him a light jab with my hand just into quadrant 3. He's pretty good actually at this. He hasn't barged into me at all. So he's respecting my space, and he's going between me and the float. What we're going to do next is we're actually going to skip the next exercise or next part of the exercise due to the wet surface and being a wooden ramp. We don't want the wood to get too wet and Rusty to slip going across the ramp. So the bit that I'm skipping is where he goes across the ramp. So we do the same thing, but we go back again and then we go forward, but then when we get close to the ramp he goes across the ramp. You'll be able to see this in other float loading videos. We're just going to skip this stage for today just for safety reasons. We don't want Rusty slipping over on the ramp if we can help it. And the other thing we're going to skip too is that you might want to add in is as he comes between me and the float, you can actually ask them to stop and to stand still in between yourself and the float for a couple of seconds, and then ask them to keep going forward to the other side. But we'll skip that as well because we don't actually need that for today. As I said, we just want to do the bare minimum, and we just want Rusty to be comfortable going on the float, and we don't want anything too fancy. Right, as I said before, this bit that we're going to skip is the next step. I'd take a couple more steps nice and close to the ramp, and I'd ask him to go across the ramp to the other side and not barge into me. But just for safety for today, because of the wet surface and the wooden ramp, we don't want any injuries if we can avoid it. And we'll just move on to the next bit, which will be asking him to go into the ramp, and that's moving. So at the moment his comfortable side is from left to right, and then we're going to move it from inside the float to outside the float. Okay, there's a couple of hazards here that I just need to watch out for. At the top of the ramp there's a couple of steel clips where the bolt attaches the top of the ramp to the float, and I don't want him to catch any of his hooves on that, because it can easily cut them open, especially if a horse that's not going on the float straight at the moment and coming in from an angle. Over to the right hand side of the float, I've actually removed the bum bar, because the bum bar swings out to the right hand side of the float and sticks outwards, pointing outwards, and that can be a bit of a hazard, especially with a horse that's again not going on the float quite right at the moment. So I don't want him walking into that and hurting himself, so I've removed it for training purposes. What we're going to do now is move the comfort zone to inside the float and the uncomfort zone outside of the float. Before we had comfort zone left and right of the float, so we're just really doing a 180 on that. Now just remember that we're working on a stony surface at the moment and he's barefoot, plus we've also got a lot of water around at the moment, so that's why we can't use the paddock. And water and mud on the wooden ramp can make it quite slippery, especially when he's coming onto the ramp from an angle. So just keeping that in mind as well too, we don't want him slipping over. Okay, with this horse he is a little bit sensitive, so I'm keeping my pressure to 1 or 2 at the very most. Now the owner did mention about him rearing up or going up when he's not wanting to do anything. So when he does do that, we just want to not really, it's just him complaining. He's not striking out, he's not having a go at me, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to continue on with what I'm doing. It's only when there's a directed attack towards you that you really need to deal with that. So when he goes up and he's just complaining, just throwing his toys out of the cot for a sec there, so don't make a big deal of that, and just continue on with what you're working on. In this case I just want him to go forward motion off the pressure towards the ramp, and then I'll release the pressure. So I'll keep asking him to come forward, ask him to come back around, face the ramp again. No big deal. I don't care whether he comes in on an angle at the moment. Okay, I just want a little bit of forward motion off the pressure, and when he starts to try, then I'll release the pressure. Right, I'll just let you watch this for a little bit. Now, it's important that I keep my pressure low with this horse and keep not too much pressure on the head. He doesn't like the head being pulled on too much, and he tends to lift his head up, and then if you keep pulling on the head, that's when he's going to rear up. So I want to keep most of my pressure to the shoulder if I can, and then as he goes on the float, obviously I'm going to move it back to quadrant 5, the top of quadrant 5. So just watch him for a while, and you'll notice that when I release or walk away from the float, it's when he's actually trying to go on the float. Alright, it doesn't matter whether it's an inch, or as I said before, he could have his feet in the same spot and just move his body weight towards where I want him to go, and that's good enough to release the pressure at the moment. Okay, I just edited that little bit out there just to clean up the poo there. So we're back into it again, and he's coming in from the side all the time. You'll notice that it's always to the left hand side. Now, that's all right for now. Just keeping in mind that that ramp is slippery there where its front feet are, and there is a clip at the top of the ramp down the bottom there, which he could catch one of his feet on and cut them open, which we really want to avoid. So I will deal with that shortly, but what we're doing at the moment is we're just working around that and taking it easy. Now, just releasing the pressure when he's on the ramp. Okay, I don't necessarily want him to go all the way on the float. I can, if his feet go a little bit further forward than what they just did before, then I'll release the pressure and he can just relax there on the ramp. Alright, just edited out a little bit of a smoko break there. Now, what I want to have a look at now, he's had a few minutes just building up his confidence, keeping those front feet on the float. Now I'm going to start increasing the pressure a little bit and asking those back feet to go onto the ramp. I don't want to put too much pressure on, just enough to get a response, not a reaction. So I'm going to keep the pressure on a little bit, and we'll just see how long it takes him to realise. Now, the other thing is too, when he goes backwards, I don't want him, when he goes backwards like that, I don't want to drive forwards until he stops, okay? Because he put his feet on the ramp there, that was a good effort from him, those back feet, so I'm going to release the pressure. Okay, I'm not going to ask him to go forward again. I will be starting to ask him to go forward again shortly, but not right now. Okay, now so he's been loading from the left hand side of the float constantly. So what I'm going to do now is just change it up a little bit. I'm going to force him to load from the right hand side, just by leading him over and then starting him from that side of the float. So he'll come onto the ramp hopefully a little bit straighter, and we'll see how that goes for the next few minutes. Right, as he comes into the float, when he gets to a certain point, he puts his head up quite high. Now it's important that I'm just going to keep very light pressure on the head. He brings his head up quite high at this point right here. He's been doing it for a while now, but I'm going to keep the pressure on quadrant 5, or the top quadrant 5, and then when I get a little bit of motion forward, now it doesn't have to be, even if he just thinks about going in, that's when I'm going to release the pressure. And it's really important that I release the pressure at any small signal that he gives me that he's actually progressing forward and not going backwards. So I'm just going to ask him to go back on again. And then when he makes it a little bit of an effort, I'll release the pressure. At this stage we have 4 problems that we need to address. We've got A, which his head is too high. He keeps putting it up when he's at this point. So I want to keep less pressure on the head so he drops his head down if he can. B, I've removed that hazard altogether. That was the bar sticking out. C is where his front feet are at the moment. It's kind of slippery and he's coming in on an angle. I don't want him to slip. And D is where his back feet are. He's coming off at an angle there and possibly could cut his back foot on the clip that's sticking out. So we're going to give him another 10 minutes and then I'm going to address those 4 problems. Okay, the reason for the extra 10 minutes is just to give him the opportunity to work or to address any of those issues that we just talked about there. So we're just going to give him a little bit extra time and just see what are those issues he does work out on his own and the ones that I have to correct. is an important part here. He's got some nice, better forward motion going, but then he's going to come backwards on his own accord. Now I do not ask him to go forward when he's going backwards. Must let him stop. Alright, now I've got a choice here. I can either ask him to go forward now once he's stopped, or I can release the pressure and start from square one again. It's up to you, depending on what horse you're working with at the time. Each horse is different. You need, as a good trainer, you need to adapt to whatever horse you're working with and basically custom make each horse. The same technique will probably not work on every single horse. Horses are like people. Every horse is an individual. So now I'm going to ask him to go back on again. Get a bit of forward motion of those feet. Alright, wait for him to stop, then ask him to go forward. Now he's coming pretty close to that back clip there of that back foot. So we're going to address that problem in a minute. I'm still giving him the opportunity to sort it out. We are getting a bit more want from him though. He's wanting to go in a bit more, which is good. He didn't have that before, so he's wanting to go in a bit more. I've got a funny feeling though that we're going to have to fix that angle where he's coming off on an angle there. He's not going to fix that one by himself. Now we've got a bit more wanting to go into the float, and he's coming on a little bit straighter than what he was, but he's still pivoting to the left hand side. Alright, and that's gonna end in an injury shortly unless we correct it. Now when I correct this, I'm going to go up to pressure like 3. Now he's only used to 2, but we're going to go up to 3 just to correct it. Now if I do this wrong, it's going to set us back 2 or 3 steps. If I do it right, it's going to make us go forward 2 or 3 steps. So we're just going to correct this in a sec. If you have trouble understanding the graph that I'm about to show you, you need to watch the tutorial on general information that will explain what we're trying to talk about there. Let's have a quick look at this picture here. Now the graph in the corner there is my general information tutorial that you need to watch if you don't understand what's going to come up next. Okay, so A, he keeps going to that side of the float. B, he's never gone to that side of the float the whole lesson unless I've asked him to. The problem being here is the foot there, that front foot there on that left clip on the float there, it's getting a little bit dangerous now, so I'm going to have to correct it. And I'm going to move my pressure up to 3. He hasn't been up to 3 before, and I'm going to move it on as quadrant 4. If I do this wrong, it'll go pear-shaped. If I do it right, it will benefit us. So let's just see what happens when I do that. Okay, that paid off quite nicely. We got some forward motion there. He is coming back on his own accord, but I don't care. He gave a really good effort there, and he went quite far in, a lot further and a lot straighter than what he just did. So I'm going to release the pressure. Just had to pause there for a bit just to clean up the ramp. So we're back into it now and see if we can finish off his float loading. Give him another 10 minutes and I think he'll be all done. Alright, I'm going to let him get away with cut him a little bit of slack coming off here on the angles when I just corrected him for doing it just before. But if he does persist a couple more times, I will go back to correcting him again, because he's actually given me quite a bit of effort at the other end of the scale. Okay, so he's giving me more effort at this end right here, and it's just coming off or going in an angle there that he's not trying. Now, if I hadn't have cut him a little bit of slack there and was too assertive, I did roll the dice a little bit and cut him a little bit of slack, and he didn't injure himself. But if I didn't, it could have easily gone pear-shaped and it would have gone backwards in progress. So it's really important just to recognize the little signals, and not do the wrong thing, because it can work against you. Alright, at this stage here, remember, when he comes back by himself, I just give him a couple of taps on quadrant 5 there to say, no, that's not what I want, but I don't force the issue until I re-ask him when he stops the backwards motion. That's important. Alright, then just release the pressure, and then I'm going to ask him to come off the float properly, rather than at an angle, and I'm going to give him plenty of room to come off the float, making sure the rope doesn't get caught on anything on the way out. this piece here where I ask him to go on the float, then ask him to, see how I'm tapping on quadrant 5 here and he's still coming back? If he was to go forward when I did that, okay, then he's ready to shut the bum bar. At the moment he's not ready to shut the bum bar. He must go forward when I tap him on the bum there. Now see how he just walked into the center divider there? Okay. I don't make a big deal out of that. I stand as close as I can to the center divider, so he understands that when he hits something solid like that, he's actually probably hitting me and I'm standing my ground. Alright, wait for him to stop going that backwards motion, then ask him to go forward motion again. Okay, see how he's coming back there when I tap him on quadrant 5? Alright, not quite ready to shut the bum bar, so I wait for him to go back, and then ask him to go forward again. I'm not going to get off the ramp because he hasn't really given me enough effort for me to warrant getting off the ramp. So I'm going to push the issue a little bit. Alright? Before I come back off the ramp. Then when I feel as though he's listening to me, then I'll come back off the ramp and I'll ask him to come off the float properly. Alright, ask him to come off the float properly and release the pressure. By the looks of things, he's stolen a bit of hay out of the front of the float there. He's realised there's a bit of a couple of slabs of hay sitting in the front of the float there. Now you'll notice that I'm loading with a long, loose rope because I want him again to make the right decision and to walk onto the float without me having to chase him up, basically. So I'm going to ask him to go on the float again. I'm going to apply some more pressure. There we go. Alright. Now this horse now float loads. Okay, so we just need to teach him to come off. Alright. He went backwards there when I tapped him on the bum. So we want to fix that. So we want him to go forward. Now again, incorrect. So I'm going to ask him to figure it out again. No, incorrect again. Right, come on Rusty, you can figure this out. Alright, that's better. Now ask him to come off again properly. Plenty of room to come off. Here's just a quick video clip of the end of the lesson. You'll notice that when he comes back on his own accord, I tap him on quadrant 5 and he goes forward. That's telling me that he's now ready to close the bum bar and ready to travel. I hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial and we'll see you in the next tutorials.